The three massive ships moved slowly through the darkness of space, their hulls scarred by decades of travel. Each vessel stretched nearly 2 kilometers long, built not for war, but for hope. Inside them, 50,000 human souls slept in cryopods, or tended to the hydroponics bays that would feed the new colony. Children played in the recreation sections. Scientists reviewed data about their destination world. Farmers checked on the seeds and livestock embryos that would birth a new agricultural system. These were the New Haven colonists, and they were just 6 days away from their new home. Captain Maria Reeves stood on the bridge of the lead ship, the Prometheus Dawn, watching the star charts with tired but satisfied eyes. 23 years she had guided this convoy. 23 years of careful navigation, system maintenance, and crisis management. Now, finally, the end was in sight. New Haven's sun glowed on the view screen, a warm yellow star that promised Earth-like conditions, and a fresh start for humanity's expansion into this sector of the galaxy. "Captain, we're picking up something on long-range sensors," said Lieutenant Chen from his station. His voice carried a note of concern that made Reeves turn immediately. "What kind of something?" "Ships, 6 of them. Unknown configuration. They're not broadcasting any identification signals." Reeves felt her stomach tighten. In all their years of travel, they had encountered other species only twice, and both times the meetings had been peaceful, even friendly. The galaxy was vast, and most races kept to themselves. But 6 unknown ships appearing this close to their destination seemed too convenient to be coincidence. "Hail them," she ordered. Standard first contact protocols. Chen worked his console, sending out greetings in 17 different languages, both human and alien. Minutes passed in tense silence. The bridge crew watched their screens, waiting. The unknown ships grew closer, their speed increasing. "Captain, they're not responding," Chen said, "but they're definitely moving to intercept us." "All ships yellow alert," Reeves commanded. "Power up defensive screens." Not that they'll do much good. She regretted the last comment immediately, but it was true. The colony ships had basic shields designed to deflect micrometeorites and cosmic radiation. Against actual weapons, they would hold for maybe a minute. The convoy had no military escort. Earth's policy was clear. Colony missions were civilian operations, and military vessels were needed elsewhere. Besides, what were the odds of running into hostile aliens in the vastness of space? Apparently, the odds were better than anyone had calculated. The unknown ships closed to visual range. The main view screen enhanced the image, showing sleek vessels painted in dark purple and gray. Their design spoke of predatory efficiency, sharp angles, protruding weapon ports, armor plating that suggested they were built for combat. These were not exploration vessels or traders. "Incoming transmission," Chen announced. "Put it through." The view screen flickered, and a face appeared that would haunt the nightmares of anyone who survived. The alien had a broad, flat head with 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern. Its skin was dark blue and covered in scales that reflected the light like oil on water. When it spoke, the translation software rendered its words in cold mechanical English. "Human vessels, this territory belongs to the Cridian Dominion. You have trespassed. Surrender your ships immediately, and your deaths will be quick." Reeves felt ice flood her veins. "This is a civilian convoy carrying colonists. We have children aboard. We're not military. We mean no harm." The aliens 4 blinked in sequence, a gesture that might have been amusement. "Your intentions are irrelevant. Your ships contain resources. Your bodies can be processed. Surrender or be destroyed." "We have families here," Reeves pleaded, abandoning pride for desperation. "Babies, scientists, farmers. We're not soldiers. Then you will die as easily as you lived. Helpless." The transmission cut off. "All ships. Emergency Protocol 7. Reeves shouted. "Scatter formation. Send the distress beacon with everything we have. Broadcast on all frequencies." The 3 colony ships began to turn, their massive bulk moving with agonizing slowness. They were trying to run, but they were built for endurance, not speed. The Cryan warships moved like hunting cats, graceful and deadly. The first missile struck the Prometheus Dawn's aft section. The shields flared bright blue and then shattered like glass. The explosion tore through 3 decks. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Reeves grabbed her chair as the deck tilted. Damage report. Cryobay 7 is breached. We've lost containment. 200 pods or Chen's voice broke. 200 people are dead, Captain. On the view screen, Reeves watched the second colony ship, the New Horizon, try to activate its emergency jump drive. It was a desperate move, potentially suicidal, but better than waiting for death. The ship's engines glowed bright as they built up power for the jump. The Crayon ships fired again. 3 missiles, this time coordinated. They struck the New Horizon's engine section just as the jump drive reached critical energy. The explosion was spectacular and terrible. The ship simply came apart, breaking into massive chunks that tumbled through space. 15,000 people gone in seconds. "Oh God," someone whispered on the bridge. The third colony ship, the Tomorrow's Promise, was trying to flee in the opposite direction. It was broadcasting on every channel, pleading in every language known to humanity. Reeves could hear Captain Park's voice over the emergency channel, begging for mercy, offering everything they had. The Cridians showed no mercy. They pursued the Tomorrow's Promise methodically, firing shot after shot into its engines, its life support, its hull. They were not trying for a quick kill. They were dissecting the ship piece by piece. Reeves could only watch in horror as the ship's death took nearly 20 minutes. 20 minutes of screaming over the comms. 20 minutes of people trapped in sections losing air. 20 minutes of pure terror for the families inside. When the Tomorrow's Promise finally broke apart, there was only the Prometheus Dawn left. The small mining station that orbited New Haven's 4th planet had been monitoring everything. They were prospectors, 30 rough men and women who had arrived 2 years ago to survey the system's asteroid belt. They had mining equipment, welding torches, and a handful of personal weapons. Against military warships, they had nothing. They came anyway. Station Chief Rodriguez brought his small ship out to intercept the Cridians. He used his industrial lasers meant for cutting asteroids to fire on the nearest warship. The beam splashed harmlessly against Militara armor. Rodriguez kept firing anyway, kept broadcasting his message. "You want to kill defenseless people? You want to murder children? Then come get me first, you bastards." The Cridians obliged him. A single missile turned Rodriguez and his brave, foolish crew into atoms. Now the Cridians closed on the Prometheus Dawn from all sides. Reeves looked at her crew. Some were crying, some were praying. Lieutenant Chen was still at his station, hands flying over the controls, trying anything that might save them. Captain Chen said quietly, "I can route all remaining power to the distress beacon. Give it enough boost to reach the nearest relay station. Earth will know what happened here. Do it," Reeves said. "Send everything. Visual logs, tactical data recordings. Let Earth know who did this." She activated the ship-wide intercom. Her voice reached every section, every frightened family, every person facing their final moments. "This is Captain Reeves. I need you all to know something. Earth has protocols for this. There are rules. When civilians are targeted, when colony ships are attacked, Earth responds. Not with diplomacy, not with sanctions. They respond with everything they have. The people who are doing this, they don't know that. They think we're alone. They think we're helpless. They're wrong." The Cridian warships opened fire. The Prometheus Dawn died hard. Its shields failed. Its hull breached in a dozen places. Sections depressurized. Fires broke out in others. People died at their stations, at their dinner tables, in their beds. The ship that had carried the dreams of 50,000 souls became a tomb tumbling through space. On the bridge, as the air turned thin and cold as the lights flickered and failed, Captain Reeves recorded one final message. Her face was cut, bleeding. Her uniform was torn, but her voice was clear. To Earth, to the Terran Defense Force, to anyone who receives this. This is Captain Maria Reeves, Prometheus Dawn. We are under attack by a species calling themselves the Cridian Dominion. They targeted civilian vessels. They murdered 50,000 colonists, including 15,000 children. They killed rescue workers. They showed no mercy. The ship shuddered around her. She could hear the hull tearing itself apart. Earth remembers. Earth is coming. And when they arrive, show these monsters what happens when you touch humanity's children. Show them no mercy. No mercy at all. The transmission ended. In the wreckage field that had been 3 proud colony ships, The Cridian commander, Zethor, surveyed his victory. Resource collection teams were already moving through the debris, gathering metals and usable technology. The organic matter would be processed for nutrients. Nothing would be wasted. A profitable day, he told his crew. Mark this system as claimed by the Dominion. We will establish an outpost here. His tactical officer examined the sensor logs. Commander, the lead ship managed to transmit a distress signal before destruction. It reached a relay station. Zethor's 4 eyes blinked in the pattern that indicated dismissal. Irrelevant. We have encountered this species once before years ago. They were weak, soft. They spoke of peace and cooperation, like children who believe in fairy tales. They have no military presence in this sector. By the time any response arrives, we will be long gone with our prize. What if they send warships? Then we will destroy those as easily as we destroyed these slow, helpless targets. Record this victory. The Dominion grows stronger with each conquest. The Cryian ships began to withdraw their holds full of salvage. Behind them, they left 50,000 bodies floating in the cold darkness. Another species learned to fear the Dominion's name. Another system absorbed into their growing empire. They did not know that 72 light-years away, on a blue planet called Earth, alarms were screaming. They did not know that the distress beacon's contents were being reviewed by admirals with grim faces. They did not know that protocols established a century ago after the last time someone had targeted human civilians were being activated. They did not know that the Terran Retribution fleet was already moving. 3 days later, when Zethor's long-range sensors detected the massive slip-space ruptures at the edge of the New Haven system, he felt the first stirring of doubt when 40 warships painted in blood red and midnight black emerged from those ruptures and began their approach. He felt something he had not experienced in his entire military career. He felt fear. The humans had arrived, and they were not coming to negotiate. The bridge of the TRS, absolute justice, was silent, except for the low hum of systems and the quiet breathing of the crew. Fleet Admiral Catherine Voss stood before the massive view screen, watching the debris field that had been the New Haven convoy. Pieces of hull plating tumbled slowly through space. A child's toy drifted past, visible for just a moment in the enhanced image, before disappearing into the dark. That single glimpse told her everything she needed to know. Voss was 57 years old, with iron gray hair cut military short and eyes that had seen too much death. Her uniform was immaculate, pressed and perfect, every ribbon and medal precisely placed. She believed in discipline and order, in following the rules. But she also believed in one rule above all others: protect the civilians. When someone broke that rule, when someone targeted the helpless, the rules changed. Behind her, the bridge crew worked at their stations with practiced efficiency. These were not regular Navy. The Retribution fleet was something different, something Earth had created after hard lessons written in blood. Every person on every ship in this fleet had volunteered. Every person understood what they were here to do. "Tactical report," Voss said quietly. Commander Jackson looked up from his station. He was a large man with dark skin and darker eyes, a veteran of 15 years who had seen action against pirates and raiders. "Admiral, we've mapped the debris field. 3 colony ships completely destroyed. 1 small mining vessel also destroyed. Based on weapon signatures and energy dispersal patterns, I count 6 hostile vessels. Estimated firepower suggests destroyer class or equivalent. Survivors." Jackson's face became even more grim. "No life signs, Admiral, not one." Voss closed her eyes for just a moment. 50,000 people gone. She had reviewed the files during the 72-hour journey here, had seen the personnel records. The little girl who wanted to be a xenobiologist, the old couple taking one last adventure, the teacher who had organized the children's education program, the farmer who had brought seeds from his family's farm, seeds planted by his grandfather's grandfather, all dead now, all murdered by someone who saw them as resources to harvest. Where are the hostile vessels now? Long-range sensors show them in orbit around the 4th planet. They appear to be establishing some kind of outpost. "They're not running, Admiral. They don't even seem concerned that we're here." Voss felt something cold settle into her chest. Not anger, not yet. Anger would come later. This was colder, harder. This was purpose. "Communications," she said. Link me to the fleet. All vessels. You're on, Admiral. Voss touched a control on her command chair, and her image appeared on every screen in every ship. 40 warships, 8,000 crew members, all of them watching her. Now, this is Fleet Admiral Voss. You've all seen the reports. You know what happened here. 50,000 civilians. 15,000 of those were children. They were murdered, not in combat, not in war, but simply because someone saw them as easy targets. The attackers killed rescue workers. They killed people who were begging for mercy. They killed people who could not defend themselves. She paused, letting that sink in. Around the fleet, on 40 bridges, and crew quarters and engineering sections and weapons bays, men and women listened. Some had family in the colony programs. Some had lost loved ones to pirates and raiders before. All of them understood why they were here. 70 years ago, Earth made a decision. We decided that when someone targets our civilians, when someone murders our children, we respond with everything we have. Not proportional response, not measured retaliation, everything. We call it the doctrine of absolute response. And today, we are going to remind the galaxy why that doctrine exists. Voss leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping, but carrying all the more weight for it. The hostile vessels are still here. They think we're soft. They think we're weak. They think that because we prefer peace, we're incapable of war. They're about to learn different. Today, we teach a lesson that will echo across every star system in this sector. Today, we show the galaxy what happens when you touch ours. She straightened and her voice became harder, colder. All ships, combat protocols, weapons free, rules of engagement, no survivors, no prisoners, no mercy. They killed the helpless, and now we are the consequence. Fleet Admiral Voss out. The view screen switched back to the tactical display. 40 red icons representing the Terran fleet. 6 purple icons representing the Krian ships. The distance between them, 3 million kilometers and closing. Helm set course for the 4th planet. Standard attack speed. I admire EDA 45 minutes. Voss sat in her command chair, her hands folded calmly on the armrests. Her crew knew that position. She always sat like that before combat. Perfectly still, perfectly controlled, like a coiled spring waiting to be released. Commander Jackson approached, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Admiral, 6 ships against 40. This is going to be a massacre. Yes, Voss said simply. It is. She pulled up a file on her personal screen, one she had been reviewing during the journey. It showed a woman's face, young and smiling. Her sister Sarah, dead for 30 years now, killed when pirates raided an asteroid mining operation where she had been working. The pirates had taken the workers as slaves, killed those who resisted. By the time Earth's response force arrived, Sarah was already gone. That was when Earth had changed its policies. That was when the doctrine of absolute response had been written. That was when the Retribution Fleet had been created. And that was when Catherine Voss, a young officer burning with grief and rage, had volunteered to be part of it. Admiral, the sensor officer called out. The hostile vessels have detected us. They're moving to defensive positions. Let them, Voss said. Tactical. Prepare the first strike package. I want every ship in position. Use the hammer formation. Hammer formation. Aye. The Terran fleet began to spread out, each ship taking a precisely calculated position. To an observer, it would look like chaos, like the fleet was scattering. But it was anything but. Every ship had a specific target, a specific firing angle, a specific role to play. They had practiced this formation hundreds of times against pirates, against raiders, against anyone who thought humanity was easy prey. The Krydian vessels began broadcasting. The translation came through automatically. Unknown vessels. This is Commander Zethor, of the Kryon Dominion. You are in claimed territory. Withdraw immediately or face destruction. Voss smiled, but there was no humor in it. Communications respond. Send visual. Her face appeared on the Krydian ship's view screens. She wanted them to see her, wanted them to see the cold, absolute certainty in her eyes. This is Fleet Admiral Catherine Voss of the Terran Retribution Fleet. You are under sentence of death for the murder of 50,000 human civilians. There will be no negotiation. There will be no surrender. There will be no mercy. You have approximately 30 minutes to make peace with whatever gods you worship. She cut the transmission. On the Cridian flagship, Zethor stared at the blank screen. His tactical officer was already analyzing the approaching fleet. Commander, these vessels are significantly larger than the colony ships. Heavy armor, multiple weapon signatures. These are military vessels. Secor's 4 eyes narrowed. 40 ships against 6. They're trying to intimidate us. Power up all weapons. Prepare to fire on my command. We will show these humans what happens when they challenge the Dominion. But in the back of his mind, something nagged at him. The human admiral's voice had been cold. Yes, but it had been something more. It had been certain. Absolutely certain. Like someone stating a fact rather than making a threat. The Terran fleet reached weapons range. At this distance, most species would begin with long-range missile volleys, feeling out the enemy's defenses, testing their shields and armor. The tactical dance of space combat usually started slow and built to a crescendo. The Terran fleet opened fire immediately with their railguns. Railguns were old technology by galactic standards. Simple physics. Accelerate a solid projectile to enormous speeds and let kinetic energy do the damage. Most advanced species had moved beyond such crude weapons in favor of energy beams and plasma torpedoes. Most advanced species had not spent the last century refining railgun technology to its absolute limit. The first salvo consisted of 6 projectiles, each one a solid slug of depleted uranium wrapped in a guidance shell. Each projectile weighed 500 kilograms. Each projectile was traveling at 30% of the speed of light. Each projectile carried the kinetic energy of a small nuclear weapon. The Krian shields were designed to deflect energy weapons. They were excellent at dispersing heat and electromagnetic radiation. Against solid matter traveling at relativistic speeds, they did absolutely nothing. The first slug hit Zethor's flagship on the port bow. The ship's armor, rated to withstand plasma blasts and laser fire, might as well have been tissue paper. The projectile punched through the outer hull, through 3 internal decks, through the main reactor shielding, and out the starboard side. The reactor went critical a second later. The flagship exploded in a ball of expanding plasma. 5 more Cridian ships died in the same salvo. Each one struck with impossible precision. Each one torn apart before they could even return fire. 6 ships gone in seconds. On the absolute justice, Commander Jackson stared at his tactical display in shock. Direct hits on all targets. All hostile vessels destroyed. Admiral, the battle is over. But the fleet did not stop firing. Railgun slugs continued to pour into the debris field, pulverizing the remains. Missile launchers opened up, sending smart munitions to seek out any piece larger than a fighter craft and destroy it. Energy weapons, the kind the Cridians had expected, now came into play, reducing metal to molten slag. Admiral, Jackson said carefully, the targets are eliminated. Should we cease fire? Voss watched the destruction with cold eyes. Continue firing for another 10 minutes. I want nothing left bigger than a dinner plate. I want anyone who salvages this debris to see exactly how thoroughly we erase those who kill our civilians. Yes, Admiral. For 10 more minutes, the Terran fleet poured violence into the wreckage. When they finally stopped, there was nothing left but a field of small fragments glowing dull red from the heat. Voss stood straightening her uniform. Scan the system. Are there any other Cryan vessels? Any stations? Any installations? Angie tinged. Scanning now, Admiral. We're detecting a small outpost on the 4th planet's moon. Basic structure, no weapons. Appears to be a resource depot they were establishing. Destroy it. Admiral, there may be civilians. There are no Cridian civilians here, Voss said flatly. This is a military installation in a system where they just murdered 50,000 of our people. Destroy it. Leave nothing standing. 4 destroyers broke formation and headed for the moon. Their missiles reduced the outpost to rubble in minutes. All vessels begin search pattern, Voss ordered. I want this entire system swept. Any Cryan technology, any data cores, any logs that might tell us where they came from, and where we can find more of them. As the fleet spread out to search, Voss returned to her chair. She pulled up the file on her sister again, looked at that smiling face. We keep our promises, Sarah, she whispered. Every single one. Commander Jackson stood beside her chair, his voice troubled. "Admiral, the Galactic Council is not going to approve of this. We just wiped out an entire military unit without warning, without attempting communication or negotiation. The warning was given when they targeted civilians," Voss said. "As for the Council, they can file their complaints with Earth. They can call it disproportionate response. They can call it whatever they want. But every species that hears what happened here will remember one thing: do not touch humanity's children." "What if the Krydian Dominion retaliates?" For the first time since entering the system, Voss smiled. It was a terrible smile, cold and predatory. "I'm counting on it, Commander. I'm counting on it." The Terran Retribution Fleet continued its search of the New Haven system, gathering data, recovering what few personal effects could be salvaged from the colony ships for return to families on Earth. And in the holds of the Absolute Justice, the intelligence officers analyzed every scrap of Krydian technology they could find. They wanted to know where these murderers came from. They wanted to know where to find their home worlds. And most of all, they wanted to know where to deliver Earth's message. A message written in fire and death that would echo across the stars. The Krydian battle group emerged from slipspace, with confidence born of 1,000 victories. 60 warships, led by High Commander Vikrol, one of the Dominion's most decorated officers. His fleet had conquered systems, crushed rebellions, and broken species who dared to resist. When the distress beacon from Commander Zethor's unit had reached Dominion space, Vale had not been worried. He had been annoyed. A minor incident blown out of proportion, he had told his officers. Some colony ships defended by a small escort fleet, and Zethor panicked. "We will arrive, eliminate the human vessels, and then I will personally strip Zethor of his command for wasting my time." Now standing on the bridge of his flagship, the Merciless Dawn, Vikrel reviewed the tactical display. His 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the data. "Where is Commander Zethor's unit?" he demanded. His tactical officer worked his controls nervously. "Hi, Commander. We're detecting a large debris field. The composition matches Krethian military vessels. All 6 ships from Zethor's unit appear to have been destroyed." "Impossible. Show me." The view screen shifted to display the debris field. Vikrel felt a stir of unease as he saw the pattern. This was not the aftermath of a battle. This was an execution. The debris was pulverized, reduced to fragments. Nothing larger than a fighter craft remained intact. This level of destruction spoke of overwhelming force, and worse, of deliberate overkill. "Scan for the human vessels," Beckel ordered. "How many ships did they bring to achieve this?" "Scanning high, Commander. We're detecting multiple vessels at the edge of the system, approximately 8 light minutes from our position. Counting now 10 ships, 15, 20. The tactical officer's voice rose slightly. 40 ships total, High Commander. All of them appear to be military-grade warships. Weekal's confidence wavered for just a moment. 40 ships was a significant force, but he had 60. The mathematics were simple. Analysis of their weapon systems. They appear to use primarily kinetic weapons. Railguns, some missile systems. Energy weapons present, but apparently secondary. High Commander, these weapons are primitive. Our shields should be more than adequate. That restored some of VCR's confidence. Kinetic weapons. How crude, how inefficient. Then we will crush them easily. All ships battle formation Delta. Shields to maximum. Prepare to engage. The Kryan fleet formed up in a standard attack formation, a wedge designed to concentrate firepower while protecting the flagship at the center. They began their approach toward the human vessels moving at attack speed. 8 light minutes would take them approximately 30 minutes to cross at combat velocity. On the bridge of the Absolute Justice, Admiral Voss watched the approaching Krydian fleet with satisfaction. "They took the bait," Commander Jackson said. "Coming straight at us, standard formation. They're not even trying to be cautious." "Why would they?" Voss replied. "They outnumber us. They think they understand our capabilities. They're wrong on both counts, but they don't know that yet." She touched her command console. "All ships, prepare for Operation Mousetrap. Signals intelligence. Are we ready?" A new voice came over the comm, belonging to Lieutenant Sarah Chen, the Fleet Electronic Warfare Specialist. "Admiral, the infiltration packages are ready. As soon as they get within range, we can begin the upload." "Good. Wait for my mark." The two fleets closed on each other. At 5 light minutes, the Critians began their long-range bombardment. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes reached out across the void. The Terran ship's shields absorbed most of the damage, though 2 destroyers reported minor hull damage. "Return fire," Voss ordered. "Standard response. I want them to think we're just another species that relies on energy weapons." The Terran fleet opened up with their energy weapons, the ones that the Critians expected. Lasers and particle beams splashed against Cranian shields, causing minimal damage. On the merciless dawn, Vikrel watched with growing confidence. As I thought, primitive species with inferior technology. They may have numbers, but we have superiority, close to optimal firing range, and prepare for the killing blow. At 3 light minutes, the Krian fleet entered the kill zone that Voss had carefully prepared. "Now, Lieutenant Chen, light them up." "Yes, Admiral." Launching infiltration packages. From each of the 40 Terran ships, small drones burst forth to the Krian sensors. They looked like missiles and were targeted as such. But these were not weapons. They were something far more dangerous. Cyber warfare platforms loaded with the accumulated computer expertise of 3 centuries of human hacking, programming, and system infiltration. The drones spread out across the Krithian formation, each one broadcasting a sophisticated attack on every frequency, every protocol, every communication channel they could detect. The Kritians used quantum-encrypted communications, supposedly impossible to crack. The drones did not crack them. They simply flooded the quantum channels with so much noise that communication became impossible. They injected false data into sensor arrays. They sent shutdown commands to systems that would accept them. They created chaos. On the merciless dawn, alarms began screaming. "High Commander, our communications are being jammed. I can't reach the other ships. Our navigation systems are showing false readings. Targeting computers are offline. Someone is inside our systems." Frel stared at his command console in disbelief as it flickered and died, then rebooted, showing data he knew was false. "How? Our systems are military-grade, quantum-encrypted, impossible to hack." His tactical officer looked up, his 4 eyes wide with fear. "High Commander, they're not hacking us. They're drowning us. They're hitting us with so many attacks simultaneously that our defensive systems can't filter them all. It's like trying to stop a flood with a bucket." The Krian fleet began to break formation. Without communication, without reliable sensors, each ship became an island. Captains made independent decisions. Some tried to flee, some tried to attack. Some simply held position, waiting for orders that never came. The Terran fleet did not wait. They had been practicing for this moment for years. "All ships execute Wolfpack tactics," Voss ordered. "Hunter-killer teams engage targets of opportunity." The Terran fleet broke into smaller groups, each one consisting of 4 ships. These groups began hunting through the Kritian formation, isolating individual vessels and overwhelming them with concentrated fire. The TRS Vengeance and her 3 companions targeted a Kritian cruiser that had separated from the main fleet. The cruiser's captain, blind and deaf from the electronic warfare, did not see them coming until missiles began impacting his shields. "Fire everything," the Vengeance's captain ordered. Railgun slugs tore through the cruiser shields, as if they were not there. The Kritians had designed their shields for energy weapons, never imagining that anyone would still use kinetic projectiles. Why would they? Kinetic weapons were slow, required enormous amounts of power to accelerate, and could be shot down by point defense systems. Except the human railguns fired projectiles at velocities that made interception impossible. The slugs arrived before the defensive systems even registered them, and the humans had spent centuries learning how to make railguns smaller, faster, and devastatingly efficient. The Kritian cruiser exploded. The Vengeance and her companions moved on to the next target. Throughout the Kritian fleet, the same story repeated. Isolated ships found themselves surrounded by human vessels that appeared out of sensor shadows, fired with terrifying accuracy, and vanished before counterattack could be organized. The humans were not fighting a battle. They were conducting a hunt. On the merciless dawn, Vrykroll finally managed to restore basic communications. "All ships, retreat. Fall back to Rally Point Beta. We need to regroup." But retreating was easier ordered than accomplished. The human ships were faster than the Quarian vessels. The Dominion had built their warships for power and armor, assuming they would always control the terms of engagement. The humans had built theirs for speed and maneuverability, the design philosophy of predators who needed to catch fleeing prey. A Crithian destroyer managed to get its engines up to full power, trying to escape. 2 human frigates pursued, matching its speed easily and then exceeding it. They flanked the destroyer from above and below, firing as they came. Inside the destroyer, the crew felt the impacts like hammer blows, hull plates buckled, decks depressurized. The captain ordered all power to shields, but it made no difference. The human weapons just punched through. They're toying with us, the weapons officer said in horror. They could have killed us with the first salvo. They're drawing this out. He was right. The human frigates were deliberately targeting non-critical systems. Life support, engines, weapons. They were not trying for a quick kill. They were making sure the Crithian crew understood exactly how outmatched they were before the end came. When the destroyer's reactor finally failed and the ship went dark, the human frigates moved on to their next target, leaving the crew to float in the cold and dark, waiting for death. Admiral Voss watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. The Crithian fleet was being torn apart. Of 60 ships, 20 were already destroyed. 15 more were crippled and drifting. The rest were trying desperately to escape, but her ships were hunting them down one by one. "Admiral," Commander Jackson said, "we've isolated what appears to be their flagship. Transponder identifies it as the Merciless Dawn. Recommend we target it for destruction." "Native," Voss said. "I want that ship crippled but intact. Disable its weapons and engines, but keep it alive. I want to speak with whoever is in command." "Understood." Directing Hunter Group Alpha to engage, 4 of the Terran fleet heavy cruisers moved toward the Merciless Dawn with deadly purpose. Beckrel saw them coming and knew there was nothing he could do. His shields were failing. His weapons were offline. His engines were sputtering. "Brace for impact," he ordered his crew. The human ships fired with surgical precision. Missiles struck the Merciless Dawn's engine cells, destroying them. Railgun slugs took out the weapon ports. Energy beams sliced through communication arrays. In less than 3 minutes, the flagship was a dead hulk floating in space. Alive, but completely helpless. Scanning the flagship, the Terran tactical officer reported, "Life support is intact. Crew appears to be alive. They're attempting to reboot systems, but we've destroyed too much." "They're not going anywhere." Boss stood. "Prepare a boarding shuttle. Commander Jackson, you have the bridge. I'm going over there personally." "Admiral, that's not protocol. Let the Marines handle it." "The Marines will come with me," Voss said. "But I want to look these people in the eye. I want them to understand exactly what they brought down on themselves." 20 minutes later, Admiral Voss walked through the corridors of the Merciless Dawn, surrounded by 12 heavily armed Marines. The Cranian crew did not resist. They could not. Many were wounded. All were terrified. These were soldiers who had conquered entire systems, but they had never faced defeat like this, had never been so utterly completely dominated. Voss reached the bridge and found High Commander Vickrell sitting in his command chair trying to maintain some dignity, despite the circumstances. His 4 eyes tracked her as she entered. "You are the human commander," he said through a translation device one of the Marines provided. "I am Fleet Admiral Catherine Voss. You are High Commander Vickrell. I presume I am. You have won this battle, but the Dominion will send more ships. You cannot win against our entire military." Voss walked closer, her boots clanking on the metal deck. "Your people killed 50,000 civilians, unarmed colonists, children, farmers, teachers, people who could not defend themselves. You then established an outpost in their system, as if that murder meant nothing. They trespassed in Dominion space. They were weak. That is how the galaxy works." "Not anymore," Voss said quietly. She pulled out a small data device and plugged it into what remained of the bridge systems. "I'm going to show you something, High Commander. Footage from your predecessor, Commander Zethor, as he destroyed our colony ships." The view screen flickered to life, showing the attack on the New Haven convoy. Vickrell watched as the colony ships died, as the mining station tried its futile defense, as Captain Reeves made her final transmission. "Why are you showing me this?" Verrill asked. "Because I want you to understand what you're taking back to your Dominion," Voss said. Look at your fleet, High Commander. 60 ships. We destroyed or crippled 57 of them in less than an hour. And we've barely begun. She leaned close to him, her voice cold as the void. This is what happens when you touch humanity's children. This is what happens when you target the helpless. We don't care if you think we're weak. We don't care if you think we're soft. We care that you murdered our people. And now we're going to make sure every species in this galaxy knows the price of that mistake. Voss straightened. We're letting you go, High Commander. 3 ships from your fleet are still functional enough to limp home. We're going to repair them just enough to make the journey. You're going to take them back to your dominion, and you're going to tell them what happened here. Tell them that the humans are coming. Tell them that we're going to find every one of your military bases, every one of your outposts, every single ship that participated in acts like this. You cannot fight the entire dominion, Vel said. But his voice was weak now, uncertain. Watch us, Voss said. She turned and walked off the bridge, her marines following. Behind her, she heard Vikrel calling out. Why? Why let us live to warn them? Voss paused at the door and looked back. Because fear is contagious, High Commander, and I want your people to be afraid. I want them to know that we're coming. I want them to lie awake at night, wondering when the waiting will break their spirit, long before we break their ships. She left the merciless dawn and returned to the absolute justice. The Terran fleet continued its hunt, tracking down the few Krydian ships that had managed to escape the initial engagement. By the time the sun rose on Earth 48 hours later, the battle was over. Of 60 Krydian warships, 3 limped away, bearing the survivors in the message. 57 became debris fields. The Terran Retribution fleet had not lost a single ship. The 3 damaged Krydian warships entered Dominion space like wounded animals crawling home. What should have been a triumphant return of a conquering battle group was instead a funeral procession. High Commander Vikrel sat on the bridge of his crippled flagship, watching the homeworld grow larger on the view screen, and tried to prepare himself for what came next. The Dominion Council met in their ancient chamber, a vast room carved from black stone and lit by plasma torches that had burned for 1,000 years. 12 high commanders sat in judgment, representing the military might of an empire that spanned 70 systems. They had built their power on conquest, on the simple principle that the strong take what they want and the weak suffer. High Commander Vikrel stood before them, his uniform torn and stained, his body bearing the marks of battle. He had submitted his full report, including all tactical recordings. Now he waited as the council reviewed the footage of the battle. The chamber was silent, except for the soft sounds of the plasma torches. The council members watched the recordings with expressions that shifted from disbelief to shock, to something that might have been fear. They saw their ships torn apart. They saw their tactics rendered useless. They saw 60 warships reduced to scrap by a force that had suffered no losses. This is impossible, Council Leader Zeroth said finally. His voice echoed in the chamber. No species fights like this. No one uses such primitive weapons to such devastating effect. How did this happen? Veril straightened, despite his exhaustion. The humans are not what we thought. Council Leader, our intelligence was wrong. Fatally wrong. We assumed they were weak because they prefer peace. We assumed they were defenseless because we had encountered only their civilian vessels. We were wrong about everything. One battle does not make them invincible. Another council member said, they caught you by surprise. They had numbers on their side. We have hundreds of ships. We have thousands. Then send them, VCL said flatly. Send your thousands of ships against these humans. See what happens. But know this. They let me live specifically so I could deliver their message. They wanted us to know they are coming. They wanted us to be afraid. The Dominion fears nothing, Zeroth declared. Then the Dominion is a fool, Vikrel said, and the chamber erupted in outrage at his words. He spoke over them, his voice rising. They destroyed Commander Zethor's unit in seconds. They tore apart my battle group in less than an hour. And the human admiral told me personally that they are just beginning. They have identified our species as a threat to their civilians. And they have one policy for such threats: eradication. The council fell silent at that word. Eradication. Not defeat, not conquest. Total destruction. What do you propose? Zeroth asked. Prepare for war, Vekal said. Real war, not the easy conquests we are used to. The humans will come for us, and when they do, we need every ship, every weapon, every soldier. And even then, I am not certain it will be enough." The council dismissed him, but Vekrel's words hung in the chamber like smoke. Over the next few days, the Dominion's military leadership argued, planned, and ultimately decided on a course of action. They would gather their Grand Armada, the largest military force they had ever assembled. 300 warships would converge on a staging point near the border of human space. They would meet this threat with overwhelming force and crush it before it could grow stronger. What the Dominion did not know was that Earth had been preparing for this moment for 70 years. On Earth, in the headquarters of the Terran Defense Force, Admiral Marcus Chen reviewed the intelligence reports with satisfaction. Chen was the head of Earth's military, a man who had spent his entire career planning for the day when humanity would need to fight a real war against a spacefaring enemy. "The Cryans are mobilizing," his intelligence chief reported. "We're seeing ship movements across their entire territory. Best estimate is they're assembling a force of 300 vessels." "Location?" Chen asked. "Here." A star map appeared, showing a system on the edge of Krydian space. "It's a natural staging point. Good defensive position, multiple jump routes, supply depot nearby." Chen studied the map and smiled. "They're thinking like a conventional military. They're going to mass their forces and try to overwhelm us with numbers. Will it work? No," Chen said simply. "Because we're not going to fight them conventionally. Get me Fleet Admiral Voss on Secure Channel and activate the intelligence network. It's time to call in some favors." Across the galaxy, in 100 different systems, messages began to reach species that had suffered under Krydian aggression. Some had been conquered, some had been forced to pay tribute, some had lost colonies to Krydian raids. All of them received the same message from Earth. The Kryan Dominion murdered 50,000 human civilians. Earth is responding. We are not asking for your help. We are only asking that you stand aside and let us pass. When this is over, the Dominion will no longer threaten anyone. The responses varied. Some species officially declared neutrality, while quietly providing intelligence on Kryan positions. Some offered the use of their space stations for resupply. A few, the bravest ones, offered to send ships to join the fight. Earth accepted the intelligence and the resupply points, but politely declined the offer of ships. "This is our fight," Admiral Chen told them. "This is our message to send. But your time to reclaim your freedom is coming." On the civilian networks, the news of the New Haven massacre spread. Earth's government released carefully edited footage of the attack, showing enough to make the crime clear without showing the worst of the carnage. Public opinion, both on Earth and among many alien species, began to shift. The Galactic Council, the supposed governing body of interstellar relations, held an emergency session. Representatives from 40 species gathered to discuss the situation. The debate was fierce. Earth's response is disproportionate, the counselor from the Palaxian Union argued. They destroyed nearly 60 Krydian ships. This is escalation, not justice. The human representative, Ambassador Sarah Williams, stood to respond. She was a small woman with gray hair and steel in her eyes. "Disproportionate," she said quietly. "They murdered 50,000 civilians. They targeted colony ships carrying children. They killed rescue workers who tried to help. And you call our response disproportionate? Let me be clear about something. Earth does not need the Council's approval. Earth does not need the Council's permission. We are informing you as a courtesy that we are going to eliminate the Krydian Dominion's ability to wage war. Anyone who stands in our way will be treated as an accomplice to the murder of our civilians. You cannot simply declare war," the Palaxian counselor protested. "We are not declaring war," William said. "War implies a conflict between equals. This is pest control. The Cryans are a threat to every peaceful species in this sector. Earth is going to remove that threat. You can thank us later." She sat down, and the chamber erupted in argument. But Williams noticed something important. The species who had suffered under Krydian aggression were not arguing against Earth's actions. They were watching with something that looked like hope. Meanwhile, the Terran retribution fleet was growing. Admiral Voss's 40 ships were reinforced by elements from Earth's regular navy. 30 more warships joined the fleet, then 50 more. The ships were different from the regular military vessels. They were painted in the same blood, red, and midnight black as the Retribution fleet. They were crewed by volunteers who had signed up specifically for this mission. Among them was a civilian transport captain named David Torres. His wife had been among the New Haven colonists along with their daughter. Torres had sold his ship, used the money to buy passage to Earth, and enlisted in the Navy at age 56. He was now serving as a gunner on one of the destroyers. "Why did you join at your age?" a young crewman asked him once. Torres had looked at him with hollow eyes. "Because my Maria and my little Rosa are floating in space somewhere near New Haven. Because someone needs to make sure this never happens to another family. And because when we find the people responsible, I want to be there when we send them to hell." Stories like Torres's were common throughout the fleet. The Retribution fleet was not just a military force. It was a promise made manifest. A promise that Earth kept to its citizens. "Touch one of ours, and we will move heaven and earth to make you pay." In her quarters on the Absolute Justice, Admiral Voss reviewed the growing fleet with satisfaction. 120 ships now, more arriving every day. Earth was stripping its defensive fleets to provide her with the force she needed. "Admiral," Commander Jackson said from the doorway, "we've received new intelligence from our assets in Krydian space. The Grand Armada is almost fully assembled. 300 ships at their staging point. They're preparing to move toward human space." "Let them come," Voss said. "Or better yet, let's not wait." "How long until our fleet is at full strength?" 72 hours until the last ships arrive. Then in 72 hours, we move. Not to defend, to attack. We're going to hit their staging point before they're ready." Jackson hesitated. "Admiral, 300 ships against our 120. Those are not good odds." Voss smiled that cold, predatory smile. "Commander, when have we ever fought fair? We're going to show them what humans do best: adapt, improvise, and win against impossible odds." She stood and walked to her window, looking out at the growing fleet. Each ship represented hundreds of crew members. Each one was a volunteer who understood what they were fighting for. Behind them, Earth watched and waited. Behind them, the families of the New Haven colonists waited for justice. Behind them, 50,000 ghosts demanded vengeance. "Send a message to all ships," Voss said. "In 3 days, we move against the Krydian Grand Armada. This is not a battle for territory. This is not a battle for resources. This is a battle to send a message to every species in the galaxy. The message is simple. Humanity protects its own. Anyone who forgets that will face the consequences." She turned back to Jackson. "And tell the engineering teams to prep the new weapons, the siege cannons. Admiral, those haven't been fully tested. They're experimental. Then the Cryans can be our test subjects." Voss said they wanted to know what humans are capable of when we're angry. They're about to find out. In the Krydian staging system, High Commander Varketh oversaw the assembly of the Grand Armada with confidence. Var was old by Krydian standards, a veteran of 40 years of conquest. He had seen the tactical recordings of VCR's defeat and studied them carefully. "The humans surprised VCL," he told his officers. "They used unfamiliar tactics in electronic warfare. But we are prepared now. We know their capabilities. We will not be caught off guard." His tactical officer, a younger Krydian named Sector, was not so confident. "High Commander, with respect, the humans destroyed 97 ships with minimal losses. Their technology is different from anything we've encountered. Should we not consider negotiation?" "Negotiation?" Var's eyes narrowed. "The Dominion does not negotiate with inferior species. We conquer them. The humans are no different." "The humans seem to think differently about their colonists," Sector said quietly. Var dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. "Their emotional attachment to their civilians is a weakness, not a strength. It makes them predictable. They will come here seeking revenge, and when they do, we will be ready." 300 ships, Sector 300. Even with their technological tricks, they cannot overcome such numbers. But late at night, alone in his quarters, Varketh reviewed the recordings again. He watched the human Admiral Catherine Voss as she spoke to Vikrel, watched the cold certainty in her eyes, watched the way she promised not threaten to come for them. And despite himself, despite his confidence and experience, and the might of 300 warships, Varth felt something he had not experienced in decades. He felt doubt. 3 days later, when the alarm started screaming, and his sensors detected the slip space ruptures of an approaching fleet. When he saw 120 human warships emerge from the void and begin their approach, Varth understood that his doubt had been justified. The humans were not coming to fight a battle. They were coming to deliver a lesson, and the Cryan Grand Armada was about to learn it the hard way. The Krydian staging system, designated KR-447 on their military charts, was normally a quiet backwater, a red dwarf star with 3 barren planets in an asteroid belt. The Dominion had built a small logistics base here decades ago, useful as a waypoint between more important systems. Now, it hosted 300 warships, support vessels, supply freighters, and nearly 250,000 military personnel. High Commander Varketh watched from the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. As the final ships arrived and took their positions, the formation was perfect, a defensive sphere with overlapping fields of fire. Any attacker would face concentrated firepower from multiple angles. His tactical displays showed green indicators across the board. Every ship was ready. Every weapon was charged. Every crew was at battle stations. "Hi, Commander," his sensor officer called out. Multiple slip space ruptures detected at the edge of the system. Counting signatures now. 20, 40, 60. Still counting. Varketh felt his confidence solidify. So the humans had come just as he predicted. How many total? 120 ships, High Commander. They're smaller than our vessels on average, but all appear to be military warships. They're maintaining position at extreme range, approximately 15 light minutes out. Varath studied the tactical display. The humans were staying far away, well beyond normal weapons range. Are they hailing us? No communication, High Commander. They're just sitting there. Cowards, one of his officers muttered. They see our numbers and hesitate. But Varketh was not so sure. He had studied everything about the human attacks. They were methodical, precise, ruthlessly efficient. They did not hesitate. So why were they sitting at extreme range? He got his answer 5 minutes later when the first siege cannon fired. The weapon was massive, taking up nearly a third of the Absolute Justice's internal volume. It required an enormous capacitor bank and cooling system. It took 3 minutes to charge and could only fire once every 10 minutes. Earth's engineers had been working on it for 5 years, ever since they realized that traditional ship-to-ship weapons might not be enough to crack heavily defended installations. The siege cannon fired a stream of plasma contained in a magnetic bottle, sustained by a miniature fusion reaction. The beam lasted for 3 seconds and carried the energy output of a small star. It crossed 15 light minutes and 15 minutes, and by the time the Cryans detected it, there was no time to evade. The beam struck the Krydian logistics base's main shield generator. The shield held for approximately 1/10 of a second before failing catastrophically. The beam continued through the station structure, vaporizing metal and flesh alike, and punched out the other side. The station came apart in a series of explosions as reactors lost containment and ammunition stores cooked off. 3,000 Krydian logistics personnel died before they even knew they were under attack. The Eternal Conquest chaos erupted. The base is destroyed. How? What weapon can fire from such range? Var stared at his displays in shock. All ships' evasive maneuvers. Do not remain stationary, move. But the Grand Armada was designed for formation combat, for coordinated attacks. Getting 300 ships to scatter took time, and the humans had more than one siege cannon. 6 more beams lanced across the void. 6 more Kryan warships exploded as the plasma streams tore through their shields and hulls like tissue paper. The beams were not perfectly accurate at such range, but with 300 ships clustered together, they did not need to be. "Return fire," Varketh ordered. "All ships fire at maximum range." Energy beams and plasma torpedoes reached out toward the human fleet, but they were firing at targets 15 light minutes away. By the time the weapons arrived, the human ships had long since moved to new positions. The Krydian weapons splashed harmlessly into empty space. Admiral Voss watched the siege cannon's effect with cold satisfaction. "Reload time's 10 minutes for the next salvo." "Admiral, the capacitors are drawing power now." "Excellent. All ships, begin the approach. Formation, Beta 7. I want the fleet spread out. If they start scoring hits, I don't want multiple ships in the blast radius." The Terran fleet began moving forward, accelerating to attack speed. But they were not charging in recklessly. They were advancing in a careful, controlled manner, maintaining their formation, staying just at the edge of effective weapons range. "They're coming closer," Sector reported to Varkeith. "Still 15 light minutes out, but closing slowly." "How long until they reach optimal combat range?" "At their current speed, approximately 90 minutes. Var made a decision. "We're not waiting for them. All ships advance. We outnumber them more than 2-1. Close to combat range and overwhelm them with firepower." It was exactly what Voss had been waiting for. "They're taking the bait, Admiral," Commander Jackson reported. "The Corithian fleet is advancing." "Of course they are." Voss said they think in terms of traditional fleet combat. Close to effective range exchange fire. Superior numbers win. They don't understand that we're not here to fight their kind of battle. As the two fleets closed, the siege cannons fired again. Another 6 Critian ships died. Then again 10 minutes later. The Critian formation was starting to spread out now, making targeting harder. But every salvo claimed at least 2 or 3 victims. At 10 light minutes, the Critians opened fire with everything they had. Their longer-range weapons reached out toward the human fleet. Some shots connected. The destroyer TRS Retribution took a direct hit from a plasma torpedo. Its shields collapsed and the hull was breached. 20 crew members died instantly. "First casualty," Jackson reported grimly. Voss's expression did not change. "Noted. Continue the approach. At 8 light minutes, deploy the drone swarms." The distance continued to close. More Critian fire reached the human fleet. 2 more ships took damage, but the siege cannons kept firing, and the Krian Grand Armada was being whittled down even before the real battle began. At 8 light minutes, the Terran ships launched their drones. Thousands of small, fast autonomous weapons burst from launch tubes and accelerated toward the Critian fleet. The Krians saw them coming and activated their point defense systems, filling space with defensive fire. It was not enough. The human drones were smart, coordinated, and numerous. They came in waves, each wave learning from the one before. They overwhelmed point defenses through sheer numbers. They targeted sensors, weapons arrays, communication dishes. They were not trying to destroy the Critian ships, just blind and deafen them. "Our sensor arrays are being destroyed," Sector shouted over the sound of impacts and alarms. "Point defense is at 30% efficiency and dropping. Launch our own drones," Var ordered. "Counter their attack." The Krians launched their drone complement, but it was smaller, less sophisticated. The human drones were built on generations of AI research and autonomous warfare systems. The Kryon drones were remote-controlled, dependent on communication links that the human electronic warfare was already disrupting. At 5 light minutes, the Terran fleet opened fire with their railguns. The first salvo consisted of 120 projectiles, 1 from each ship. They were not the massive siege weapons from before. These were standard anti-ship railgun slugs, each one weighing 500 kilograms and traveling at relativistic speeds. The flight time was 5 minutes. In those 5 minutes, the Terran fleet fired 3 more salvos. Nearly 500 projectiles were in flight when the first wave arrived at the Critian formation. The slugs tore through the Grand Armada like bullets through paper. Critian shields already weakened by the siege cannon attacks and damaged by drone strikes failed completely. Ships that had served the Dominion for decades were torn apart in seconds. Holes split, reactors exploded, crew sections depressurized. Barketh watched in horror as his fleet died around him. Ships that had been green on his tactical display turned yellow, then red, then went dark. In 15 minutes of railgun bombardment, the Grand Armada lost 100 ships. "All ships scatter," he ordered. "Break formation and engage independently." But breaking formation in the middle of a battle was chaos. Ships collided as they tried to maneuver. Coordinated defense collapsed. The Terran fleet, maintaining perfect formation and communication, exploited every gap and weakness. "Target their command ships," Voss ordered. "I want their leadership eliminated." The Terran targeting computers, enhanced by AI systems that could process millions of data points per second, identified the Critian command vessels by their communication patterns and formation positions. Railgun slugs began targeting them specifically. The Critian flagship, 2 ships down from the Eternal Conquest, exploded as 3 slugs struck it simultaneously. Another command ship tried to flee and was hunted down by a pack of human destroyers. The Cridian command structure was falling apart. On the Eternal Conquest, Varketh made the hardest decision of his life. All ships full retreat, scatter, and jump to any safe system. We cannot win this battle. Sector looked at him in shock. High Commander, if we flee, we abandon the Dominion's honor. If we stay, we abandon our lives, Varketh said flatly. Order the retreat now. The Grand Armada, what remained of it, broke and ran. Ships jumped to slip space in every direction, desperate to escape. Some made it, many did not. The human ships were faster, and they had been designed for exactly this kind of pursuit. The battle turned into a massacre. Human wolf packs hunted down fleeing Cridian ships one by one. Some Cryans tried to surrender, broadcasting white flag signals on all channels. The human ships ignored them. Admiral Voss had been clear. No mercy, no survivors. David Torres, the 56-year-old gunner, who had lost his wife and daughter, watched through his targeting scope as his shots tore apart a Cridian cruiser. He felt no satisfaction, no joy, only a cold sense of completion. "That's for you, Maria," he whispered. "That's for Rosa." The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Cridian Grand Armada had ceased to exist. Of 300 ships, fewer than 30 escaped. 270 ships were destroyed. Over 200,000 Cridian military personnel were dead. The staging system was littered with debris fields and the frozen bodies of those who had died in the void. The Terran fleet had lost 9 ships with 15 more damaged. It was a victory, but it was not without cost. On the absolute justice, Admiral Voss stood before her fleet once more. "Today we have sent a message to the Cryan Dominion and to every species watching. The message is simple. Do not touch our civilians. Do not target the helpless. If you do, this is the consequence." She paused, looking at the faces of her crew. "But our work is not finished. We are going to pursue the fleeing Cridian ships. We are going to track down every military installation, every shipyard, every base that supports their war machine. We are going to dismantle the Dominion's ability to wage war, piece by piece." Commander Jackson stepped forward. "Admiral, with respect, the Galactic Council is already calling for us to stop. They say we've made our point. They say further action is unnecessary." Voss's eyes were cold and hard. "The Council can say whatever they want. They did nothing when the Cridians were conquering peaceful species. They did nothing when colonists were murdered. They only care now because we're winning. Tell the Council that we will stop when the Cridian Dominion surrenders unconditionally. Tell them we will stop when they agree to complete military disarmament and war crimes trials. Tell them we will stop when justice has been served for the 50,000 people who died at New Haven, not before." Over the next 3 months, the Terran Retribution Fleet carved a path through Cridian space. They destroyed military bases. They dismantled shipyards. They blockaded supply routes. They did not target civilian populations, but they systematically eliminated every aspect of the Cridian military infrastructure. The Dominion tried to fight back. They assembled smaller fleets using guerrilla tactics and hit-and-run attacks. But the humans adapted to each new strategy faster than the Cridians could implement it. Human intelligence networks built through contacts with species who had suffered under Dominion rule provided perfect information about Cridian positions and plans. Finally, 3 months after the Battle of KR-447, the Cridian Dominion government sent an official message requesting terms of surrender. Admiral Voss received the message in her quarters. She read it carefully, then composed her response. The terms are as follows: complete and immediate disarmament of all military vessels. All weapons of war to be handed over to a neutral third party for destruction. The Dominion will pay reparations to all species who have suffered under their aggression, including full compensation to the families of the New Haven colonists. All Dominion leadership involved in the attack on New Haven will be tried for war crimes by an independent tribunal. The Dominion will accept monitoring and inspection teams to ensure compliance. These terms are not negotiable. The response came back within hours. The Dominion accepted. 1 week later, Admiral Voss stood in the halls of the Galactic Council, alongside representatives from 40 species. The Council had agreed to sponsor a memorial for the victims of the New Haven massacre, partly out of genuine sympathy, and partly out of fear of what Earth might do if they refused. 50,000 names were carved into a wall of black stone, each one representing a life that had been stolen. Voss ran her hand along the carved letters, feeling the names under her fingers. Here was Maria Torres and Rosa Torres. Here was Captain Maria Reeves. Here was a 10-year-old boy who had wanted to be a starship captain. Here was an old couple who had sold everything for one last adventure. "We remember," Voss said quietly, speaking to the names. "We came for you. We kept our promise." Behind her, David Torres stood with other family members of the colonists. His face was wet with tears, but his back was straight, and his head was high. Justice had been served. His Maria and his Rosa could rest. The Galactic Council also established a new law, officially named the New Haven Accords. The law was simple. Civilian vessels were off-limits in any conflict. Any species that targeted non-military ships would face immediate intervention by the combined forces of the Council, led by Earth's Retribution Fleet. No species objected. They had all seen what happened to those who broke this rule. In the years that followed, the Cryan Dominion faded from power. Their military was gone. Their empire fragmented as subject species reclaimed their independence. The Cridians themselves became a quiet, peaceful society, remembering the lesson they had learned at such terrible cost. Earth's Retribution Fleet remained active, but it never needed to fire another shot in anger. The galaxy had learned: touch humanity civilians, target the helpless, and the consequence was absolute. It was not a threat. It was a promise, written in the wreckage of 300 warships. Admiral Catherine Voss retired 6 months after the end of the campaign. She was 58 years old and had served humanity for 36 years. At her retirement ceremony, the President of Earth personally thanked her for her service. Voss accepted the thanks with quiet dignity, but those who knew her well could see the weight she carried. She had done what was necessary, but necessity did not make the burden lighter. She moved to a small house on the coast, far from the military bases and the memorials. Some nights, she would stand on her porch and look up at the stars, wondering if she had done the right thing. The answer was always the same. She had done what needed to be done. She had protected humanity's future. She had ensured that no other colony ship would suffer what happened to New Haven. But she also thought about the Kethian crew members who had died in the battles, young soldiers following orders, engineers who had never fired a weapon. They had paid for their leader crimes with their lives. War was like that. The guilty and the innocent died together, and the survivors carried the memory. David Torres never remarried. He spent his remaining years working with the families of other victims, helping them process their grief and find meaning in the tragedy. He started a foundation that provided scholarships for children of colonists, ensuring that the dream of exploration and settlement would continue despite the risks. On the anniversary of the New Haven massacre, he would travel to the memorial and read names aloud, all 50,000 of them. It took him 18 hours to read every name, but he never missed a single one. Other families would join him, taking turns reading so his voice would not give out. The tradition continued for decades, long after Torres himself passed away. The names would be read every year so that no one would forget. The Corinthians, for their part, underwent a profound cultural transformation. The younger generation rejected the militaristic values of their parents. They studied what had happened, not from their government's propaganda, but from the raw tactical recordings that humans had distributed across the galactic networks. They saw the footage of the colony ships dying. They saw the desperate broadcasts from Captain Reeves. They saw what their empire had done in their name. A movement began among young Cridians to make amends. They could not bring back the dead, but they could ensure their deaths had meaning. Cridian volunteers joined humanitarian organizations. They worked on colony worlds, helping to build the settlements that their military had once destroyed. They studied human culture and philosophy, trying to understand the species their leaders had so catastrophically misjudged. One young Cridian named Valera traveled to Earth specifically to visit the New Haven Memorial. She stood before the wall of names for 6 hours reading each one, trying to comprehend the enormity of what her people had done. When security tried to escort her away, concerned about potential hostility from human visitors, she refused to leave. "I need to see them," she said through tears. "I need to see what we took from you." Every name, every person. I need to bear witness. David Torres, who was there reading names that day, saw her. He was 83 years old now, his body failing, but his mind still sharp. He walked slowly over to where she stood. "You are Creon," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," Valera replied, waiting for anger, for hatred, for the violence she probably deserved. Torres looked at her for a long moment, then handed her the list of names. "Would you help me read them? My voice is not as strong as it once was." Valera took the list with shaking hands. Together, a human who had lost everything, and a Critian who carried the guilt of her species. They read the names of the dead. When they finished, Torres put a hand on her shoulder. "You did not do this," he said. "Your leaders did, but you came here. You faced what happened. That takes courage. Honor their memory by making sure it never happens again." Valera became one of the most prominent advocates for peace in Critian space. She wrote books about the massacre and its aftermath. She spoke to schools and militaries about the dangers of viewing other species as inferior. She became the bridge between two peoples who had been enemies. The Galactic Council, which had been largely ineffective before the New Haven incident, was reformed. Earth insisted on new rules and new enforcement mechanisms. The Council created a rapid response force drawn from multiple species that could intervene when civilian populations were threatened. Earth provided the training and much of the equipment, ensuring that the force would be effective. Other species watched and learned. The humans had demonstrated something that changed the calculation for every would-be aggressor. They had shown that attacking civilians was not just morally wrong. It was strategically suicidal. The cost was too high. The response was too devastating. Better to negotiate, to trade, to find peaceful solutions. Humanity's reputation across the galaxy shifted. Before New Haven, they had been seen as friendly, but naive, peaceful but weak. Now they were seen as something else. A species that preferred peace, but was terrifyingly effective at war. A species that valued life so much that they would cross any distance and overcome any obstacle to avenge their murdered. A species that kept their promises, both the good ones and the terrible ones. New human colony ships began launching again. Within a year of the Critian surrender, these missions were different from before. Each convoy was escorted by military vessels. Each colony had defensive installations from day one, and each colonist knew that if anything happened, if anyone threatened them, Earth would come. Earth would always come. The New Haven system itself became a memorial. The wreckage of the colony ships was left in place, marked with beacons, so that any ship passing through the system would see them. A small station was built nearby, staffed by volunteers who maintained the memorial and told the story to any who would listen. On the planet that the colonists had hoped to settle, a different colony eventually established itself. They named their first city Reeves, after the captain who had fought to save her people. The main street was called Memorial Way, and every building on it was named after someone who had died in the massacre. The colonists lived and worked and raised families in the shadow of tragedy, but they refused to let that tragedy define them. They built a thriving community as a testament to human resilience. Admiral Voss lived to be 91 years old. She never spoke publicly about the campaign after her retirement, despite countless requests for interviews and appearances. She had said everything she needed to say during the war itself. Her actions spoke louder than any words could. When she died, her funeral was attended by dignitaries from across human space and representatives from dozens of alien species. The Critian government sent a delegation led by Velsara, who laid a wreath bearing the names of every Critian who had died in the war. It was an acknowledgement of responsibility and a gesture of peace. Voss was buried with full military honors. Her coffin was draped with Earth's flag and carried by 8 officers from the Retribution fleet. At her grave, alongside her medals and citations, they placed a simple hologram. It showed her sister Sarah, young and smiling, frozen in a moment, before tragedy had touched their lives. The inscription on Voss's headstone was simple. She kept her promise. In the years and decades that followed, humanity continued to expand into the galaxy. They established trade routes and diplomatic relations. They shared technology and culture. They made friends and allies among the stars. But they also maintained the Retribution fleet, always ready, always watching. A reminder of the price of aggression. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humans were not predators by nature. They did not seek conquest or dominion. They genuinely preferred peace and cooperation. But they were also not prey. They were something else entirely. A species that could be both gentle and terrible, patient and ruthless, forgiving and utterly uncompromising. They were a species that protected their own with absolute commitment. They were a species that, when pushed beyond all reasonable limits, would show no mercy until justice was served. They were a species that every other civilization learned to respect, not out of fear alone, but out of understanding. The New Haven Accords became the foundation of galactic law. The principles were simple: protect civilians, respect sovereignty, resolve disputes through diplomacy whenever possible, but respond with overwhelming force when those principles were violated. It was a system that worked because everyone understood the consequences of breaking it. 50 years after the massacre, the galaxy held a moment of silence on the anniversary. Every space station, every ship, every colony paused to remember what had happened and to honor the memory of those who had died. It became an annual tradition not just for humans but for all species, a reminder that civilization required protection, and that protection sometimes required sacrifice. The names carved into the memorial wall at the Galactic Council remained a permanent record. 50,000 names, 50,000 lives, 50,000 reasons why the galaxy had changed. And in human space, parents still told their children the story of New Haven. They told them about the colonists who had dreamed of a new world. They told them about the tragedy that had befallen those colonists. They told them about Admiral Voss and the Retribution fleet. They told them about the terrible justice that had followed. But most importantly, they told them why it mattered. They told them that every life had value. They told them that the strong had a responsibility to protect the weak. They told them that some lines should never be crossed, and that humanity would always stand on the side of the innocent. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson, written in blood and fire across a dozen systems. But it had learned well, and in the end, that was the legacy of New Haven. Not the tragedy itself, but the galaxy that emerged from it. A galaxy that was safer, more just, and more civilized. Because humanity had shown what happened when you targeted the helpless. They had shown no mercy to those who deserved none, and in doing so, they had ensured mercy for all those who came after. The stars continued to shine as they always had. But now they shone on a galaxy that understood something fundamental about humanity. They were not just explorers or traders or diplomats. They were guardians, and they kept their promises, every single one, no matter the